Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Verse Stars podcast. All my loyal listeners, thank you for continued support. And remember, click the subscribe button, everybody. This is an amazing episode because Dominic Lewis and Daniel Futcher board the mothership. You know them as the composers of My Adventures with Superman on Max. Come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Hello, Mr. Lewis and Mr. Futcher. Thank you so much for coming to the Verse Stars podcast.
Thank you for having us.
So, my pleasure. So, I always start off with a question of inspiration. So, what inspired your love of music and who your earliest influences?
Oh, Danny, you go first.
I was a Eddie Van Halen freak. Yeah, I mean everything. The way he dressed, the way he would. I couldn't play like he played, but I tried. And the way his stage presence. I used to play in bands, so he was still is my bar.
So, just out of curiosity, so when we get a little bit more into talking about My Adventures with Superman, are you doing that guitar riff? Is that you playing?
The theme song is actually by Kyle Troop, who is a songwriter. So we did not do that, but the guitar playing in the show is both of us.
Very cool.
I kind of got Dom into a slight guitar addiction, I would say. Dom, do you agree?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So way back when we first met each other, Danny got me onto guitars, and now, however many years later it is, I've got north of 25 around me right now.
I think you have maybe like maybe three guitars, right? The 335, a Jag,
yeah,
and a Strat.
Yeah, I don't even know. I did have the Strat because Larry gave me the Strat. The
guitar. Yeah. So I was like, oh, these are pretty cool, but
so for us,
a little better.
So for us music muggles, what is the difference between the three guitars? Like how do so? Because I don't know if I would ever be able to tell the difference, but I imagine someone who really knows guitars can. And playing those three types of guitars, like what is the difference in sound and quality of the sound and everything else?
Well, the 335 I had was a semi hollow body, so it's not a solid piece of wood, so that's already a different sound. And then you put some humbuckers in that, so it's a combination of body and pickups. Sorry, humbuckers are pickups. And so the three guitars I had, the goal was to be able to get any style with those three. And now I don't have to worry about that because I've got north of 23, so I can choose whichever one I want, whether it's a metal guitar or a Strat for some funk or some telly for some country or whatever it might be. Yeah, but we've totally skipped over the first question, which was my influences. I was a classical kid. My parents are both classical musicians, so I started out with, a lot of opera from my mom, a lot of string quartets from my dad, but then they would play Beatles, Beach Boys, Hendrix, Clapton, Dire Straits, all that old school good stuff. So that was my diet, really, a mixture of classical and like classic rock / pop, and kind of still is, actually. So yeah.
So between the two of you, once again, influence of Van Halen, influence of classical and opera. How do these two interests and backgrounds mesh as within this partnership?
Oh,
I mean, listen to the score, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you've pretty much summed up the score.
Yeah.
Which is yeah. So it's like, we started out with kind of a very classical approach, a very traditional kind of nod to the Richard Donner Superman we all know and love, scored by John Williams. So that was the initial jumping off point. And then everyone at Warner Brothers kind of wanted to update that and make it a bit different. And so, the Van Halen influence started sneaking in, and rather than doing the main theme on horns and strings, the guitars start coming in, and then more metal guitars started coming in for bad guy themes, and they just permeated to the point where they were equal, right, Danny? It was as orchestral as it was rock and synth based. So yeah, I mean, our influences are kind of, you can't avoid them with the score. It's a perfect mesh of the two of us.
So one thing about a partnership is that a partnership that works well is one that balances each other's strengths and weaknesses. So how does one of you balance which strengths of the other?
Cool.
Well, Dom can sing, and I can't. So in this show, we used a lot of vocals and stuff, like warped, kind of messed up vocals. So Dom did a lot of those, and I guess like I played a lot of the guitar stuff, or like the soloistic guitars. I don't know. What do you think, Dom?
I think it's more of our similarities as it was to our differences. I think that's why it works so well.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, Danny started with me many years ago and watched me write and started, you know, helping out on DuckTales and has been around me for years and years and years. So it's just he's been able to see how I do things and then bring what he brings to the table. So it's almost like I don't know. It started. He kind of started out as a mini me, and now he's his own person. And like, just I mean, I would say he's better than me now, which is a sad thing to say. But and he, you know, I think it's more about how similar we are, and that we kind of love the same thing. We love writing the same music, and that's why we're able to work together for the length of time we have. You know, we have.
Yeah, I mean, like Dom and I, I mean, when we first met, like we were geeking out over Earth, Wind, and Fire records. I mean, which is like not like our styles, right? Like we just have a super, like we're very similar in our musical taste. So when we've always worked in a musical way together, it's always been really seamless, and we always just pick up on. I don't know. It's always been really easy because we have such similar tastes. So it's never been like, oh, you handle that and I'll handle this, or vice versa. It's more like, dude, check this out. And he's like, yeah, that's awesome. Because we just have the same like kind of vocabulary and same just taste. So it's always kind of been that way.
And like other collabs I've done in the past, and I'm sure Danny, it's the same for you. Yeah, I mean, like other collabs I've done in the past, it's been very much that, you know, you take that because you do that, and I'll do this because I do that. Whereas with this and working with Danny, it's like, you know, that doesn't even come into play because it's like, okay, well, it's all going to sound in a very similar space because that's who we are as, you know, it's like, I'm trying to think of a comparison. It's not even like you know, it's with the Beatles, Lennon and McCartney, they complemented each other because they were different. I'm trying to think of people that were so in tune that it was just like a duet that just works. So, I mean, I guess it's like two voices, you know, two voices that just work together that are quite similar, like a Simon and Garfunkel thing. It just, you know, it's very similar. It works. You know, he likes stuff that I don't like. I like stuff that he doesn't like, but we don't talk about that. we keep it in the same pool. So
yeah, I mean, it also helps though that Dom taught me a lot. Like I learned most of everything I know from Dom. So I was definitely molded by his taste. I mean, we have musical tastes that we enjoy together, but as far as film scoring and everything, he's taught me everything I pretty much know. So I guess that sort of helps too, because if I'm doing, you know, what do you think about this, dude? He's like, I showed you that 2 years ago. So yeah, it works for me. So that's how that goes.
Now, one interesting thing that you mentioned, the idea of you're composing music for My Adventure with Superman. You're doing it like a very non-traditional type music, but My Adventure with Superman feels like very non-traditional Superman. So how does your approach to the music mirror the non-traditional approach to the show?
I mean, I would say the element of guitars and just production type sounds, a lot of percussion, guitars, and synths, that's kind of where that was our right hand turn. Obviously, the John Williams stuff is iconic and you know, sort of untouchable. So that was awesome for that score. But we were doing something different. The show was doing something different. And Jake and Brendan, the creators of the show, and Josie, they had the idea like, let's add a bunch of guitars. And symphonic metal is like not my thing. I was kind of like, are we sure about that? This could be super corny, in my opinion. But that was the idea. So it's like, how do we figure out how to make that something that we enjoy? And that was the kind of the wrench that was in our orchestral score. It was really the guitars, the perk, and the vocals, and I think that's what we try to bring to it, I guess, because it is a really unique show for sure.
Yeah, but at the same time, while being non-traditional and unique, there is nostalgia within it. Even within the look
for sure.
of Clark, and there are nods to previous versions of Superman. So that was important for the showrunners too, to somehow encapsulate that, but not go too far with it. So it's so we're just ripping off other people. So I think it's a really nice mix of the two things.
So as you mentioned, John Williams, the score, kind of like existing within the shadow of John Williams' score, but you also have the shadow of Hans Zimmer, what he did with Man of Steel as well, which became maybe for the younger generation, their iconic sound of Superman is what came out of, like I said, Man of Steel. So how do you nod to both, or is there more of a instinct to want to push directly away from it and use them of what not to follow in the footsteps of, to make it yours?
I don't know. I don't think we spoke about Hans once, which is kind of rare because I worked for him for a while. So yeah, the Zimmer Superman didn't really come up. It was it was mixtures of finding, as I said, that nostalgia of the Williams stuff, but obviously not taking it too far. And yeah, I mean, there's almost like a sort of anime inspiration that we wanted to lean in on, which I think that was a huge inspiration for the showrunners and for us, and that's where the guitars and the synths come from, because that stuff is so awesome in the way it kind of melds all of the synths and orchestra and guitars and everything together, and it's the kitchen sink, but yet it works. And that was sort of the jumping off point. Even in when I heard about the gig, it was like, this is the sort of stuff we're looking for, and it was a bunch of anime things. So that was the jumping off point. But yeah, Danny, do you want to add to that? I mean,
I don't know how much we even talked about John Williams. Maybe a little bit at the beginning, but that wasn't like, it wasn't like Hans and John Williams did these things, so how can we be different, or how can we have an homage to that? It's, those things exist, like they're in our heads, like whether we want them or not, and let's just score it. Let's just let's just take what the show's given us and do it. And I've seen comments from people like super kind, like talking about the score, saying, "Oh, this is like a Man of Steel moment in the music," and it's like, of course we're not thinking that, but it's there, like that. Though that is always there, John's music and Hans's music, and so it was there, but it was never like, let's homage it or let's go away from it. It just kind of existed, and we just took what the image had for us.
Now, obviously, when they talked to you about the show, and the elements behind the show, in their pitch to you guys, what kind of boiled down their concept of what they believed My Adventure with Superman is, and then what did it become for you two, what My Adventure with Superman is? If you could boil it down to a basic concept to build upon.
I mean, it's Clark's story. It's about Clark. He happens to be Superman. That was where I felt that this show was unique. It wasn't a Superman story. It was Clark's story, his relationship with Lois, his relationship with Jimmy, his parents, and where he works. It was Clark's story. He happened to be this crazy creature, this alien. That's what it was, and that's the heart of it. It's Clark. It's not Superman. He's learning his powers in the beginning of this show. He really, at the end, he still doesn't know his powers. It's about him, like a coming of age story of Superman, but it's Clark. He is Clark in his mind, and that's the pilot. You see baby Clark flying, you know, and we hear his theme at that moment, and like it's Clark. It's not Superman. So that's what I felt.
Yeah, and from that about the trio of friends, you know, Superman's almost, it's almost like an obstacle in his life that he has to do this,
of course,
job when all he wants to be is this regular dude that, you know, can take Lois on a date and hang out with his friend Jimmy, and like the three of them just hang out. So it was, you know, how do we ground it with music and keep it about the trio, keep it about Clark, and you know, it's never not going to be fun doing big Superman themes. It's always great to do that, but the challenge of encapsulating the core characters and the intimacy of those guys was a really nice one.
Now, if my research was correct, you guys also both composed Violent Night, which I had you guys down as working on that.
I did Violent Night. Danny did additional music on that.
Okay.
That one was the co-write, but
this is our first collaboration together.
So for Mr. Lewis then, so how do you switch over from Violent Night to My Adventures with Superman, which tonally does feel different, at least a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I love switching genres. I think there are obviously some common grounds there with the orchestra, but Violent Night was something I never expected it to be, this kind of throwback mixture of like Williams and Kamen sort of Die Hard meets Home Alone thing. When I read the script, I was thinking of like, oh, how can I make this cool Father Christmas thing with like guitars and synths and make it cool? And then I watched it and I was like, oh no, this needs to be a throwback thing. So I mean, it was so fun to just kind of dip back into my college days and kind of look at some scores and just write some very floral orchestral music, and just basically get as many public domain Christmas carols into the thing as possible. And you know, I got to sing. You know, the budget wasn't great on that, so we didn't have budget for a choir. So you know, I tracked myself up the full choir, 4 parts, doing, you know, whether it was Ding Dong Merrily on High or whatever it might be at that point. So yeah, it was switching genres, whether it's Violent Night or Bullet Train or whatever it might be. As a composer, and I think Danny would agree, it's good to keep dipping into different genres, because if you do the same thing too much, it gets a bit stale. But yeah, you know, Danny helped out on Violent Night. He wrote some great stuff, and it's fun, right, dude? Doing that kind of throwback stuff. It's so much fun.
So, yeah, I mean, we all grew up on those movies and those, you know, those scores, and yeah, it was a lot of fun to be a part of it and to see. I mean, but it was never one or the other, right, Dom? It was like people were getting like their heads cut off. You know, it's like totally over the top, but it was really cool. It was a fun experience for sure.
It was kind of odd too, because not too long before, I mean, like a month before that, I'd done Spirited, which was a very different Christmas film. Again, very orchestral, but way more candy canes and like saccharine sweet stuff. And then I had to find a way of doing the orchestral thing that was way more bombastic and you know, more towards the Cayman side of things, with people getting shot and heads chopped off and like ice skates going through their neck and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, I mean, I love all that stuff. I would if ideally I would have different genres every project, so I'd move every single time, because it's just so much fun.
So, well, one of my favorite pieces in My Adventures with Superman is the Superman Parasite fight that occurs in the series. So can you kind of break down a little bit how you approached that battle? What kind of things did you focus in on as in your approach to writing it?
Go for it, Danny. That's all you, bud.
The Parasite fight at what was that, 9, I guess, right?
The one I'm thinking about is the one that is the first time we see Ivo. He turns into he puts on the Parasite suit and he takes out Superman. Right. I think that's like the 3rd or 4th episode, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, that was like Dom wrote this really cool. We did a couple suites for this show before we really got dug into the episodes. Dom wrote this really cool like I don't know if you, Dom, you remember like it wasn't like bad guy music, but it was just kind of like just a little bit more tense.
Yeah.
And I remember, we that the beginning of that fight sequence, we led with that, and that kind of set the tone for the bad guy music, and that kind of set the tone of like, okay, here are the stakes. But then in that fight, like when he's kind of gaining his powers, and when Alex like slams the button to create the force field, like it goes full metal. I mean, like the orchestra kind of falls away. And we did that a lot this season. It's like, and that was more, the challenging part was transitioning from orchestral music to just full metal and back and forth and doing that multiple times. But that fight in particular was one of the first times we got to flex our like metal muscles a little bit. And it was like, you know, it was just full on metal.
Yeah.
For most of it. Yeah.
Brandon couldn't get enough of it. He was like, more. Like he was the driving force behind the metal for sure. I mean, Jake likes it too, but he was definitely the driving force. And then with that next fight, is it 9 when it is 9, right? When they're all there and he's in the air.
Like,
That's my favorite one you did. That was so badass. Because it was sort of taking,
when you're looking at or being scoring My Adventure with Superman, how much lead time do you have between getting the sequence and being able to score it before you have to prepare for airing?
Well, airing is we have to, our deadline is the mix, when they mix dialogue, effects, and music together. First season was difficult. We had Dom.
Well, the thing is, when you come up with a palette like we came up with, it's all great.
Yeah, we screwed ourselves.
Yeah, we really did. We totally fucked ourselves because we did this thing that was like orchestra, synths, guitars, vocals, like the biggest palette you could imagine. And everyone's going, "This is awesome! It's so epic! It's so great!" And then they go, "And you have a 5-day turnaround," and you're like, "Oh shit, really?" So yeah, we really screwed ourselves with that, but you know.
Yeah, and then that show was, I mean, it's wall to wall which means like there's music the whole way through, but it needed it. Like the show, like we couldn't skimp on it. You watch it, it's like these amazing action sequences, and it's like crazy, and that's like story wise, it's at a pinnacle, and the animation is at a pinnacle. It's like you got to do everything. There's no getting around it. It was tight for sure. Yeah, we probably had 5 to 7 days per episode, like from when we started to when we had to deliver. But yeah, it just needed everything. Like there was no other option. I didn't see. I didn't learn.
We didn't learn because we did the same thing I did the same thing on DuckTales. Okay, but that was, I think that was 2 weeks. We got slightly longer for that, but
so
yeah, we don't seem to learn from our mistakes. We just like writing massive orchestral stuff that needs programming. It takes like a whole day to do 30 seconds of orchestral programming. So but it sounds good.
Okay. Do we know anything about the season 2 at all, and where we are for that, and whether or not you are involved in it?
Yes, that's been announced. The season 2 is happening, and we are working on it. Yes.
Yeah,
that's all I can say.
Yeah, Danny will be taking that one over.
Okay. Is it you're soloing the second season?
Danny's gonna solo that.
I mean, all the themes are Dom and I wrote the themes, so all that stuff's being carried over. But as far as episode per episode work,
So I know you can't talk about it, but I'm going to ask you some questions about it. What is there anything you can say about the music for season 2? I mean, is it becoming more complex? Is it being like, what are you doing differently for the second season that may not have been there for the first?
I don't want to. Obviously, I don't want to spoil anything. It does take a big musical turn about halfway through. The first half of the season's kind of Superman score that we all know, and then it takes a big turn, and then throughout the rest of the season, it's sort of, I don't want to spoil, but that turn, it's sort of, then as the season progresses, we add more of the original Superman stuff, but it is a big tonal shift for sure.
The story dictates a large tone.
Yeah, the story. Yeah.
Which Danny's, I mean, he's killing it. The stuff sounds so great. And then even though it's shifting, people won't be disappointed. It's really good.
Yeah. No, it's not. It's in the same. It still packs the same punch, but it's a little different.
So the other question that's really important, for whatever reason, season 1, the score is not available yet on things like iTunes and everything else. Is it going to be? Do you have any news on that? Is there any way we can find it?
We're trying to figure that out, aren't we? But
Yeah. Yeah, like it's really up to Warner Brothers. I mean, it's not our decision. Or obviously, we want to share it, people, but it's not really our decision. So we are. I have inquired about that for sure, about how to do that, but it's really not up to us.
Yeah, those kind of we run into this quite a lot. We had the same problem with DuckTales, is that I can't remember the nitty gritty of contracts and why they can't, but or if it's not financially worth it for them. But I mean, just like remembering DuckTales, I get requests like every week to be like, when's it coming out? I want this episode, I want this, and it's like, it's out of my hands. I wish I could. So we will really push, because we're super proud of this Superman stuff, and I know that Jake and Brendan want to feel the same.
For sure,
and they want to get it out there too. So we're doing what we can. So yeah, if the listeners want to drum up some support and demand that it must be released, and that only helps.
Yeah, we can get a petition going.
Yeah, right.
So if listeners are listening to the show, get that petition rolling. Let's get it on at least iTunes. Let's have a nice score on there that we can pick up and listen to. Mr. Lewis, Mr. Future, I want to thank you so much for coming on my show. You guys were awesome and extremely patient. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. It was fun.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
yeah, when you guys work on your next project, come on back and especially talk My Adventure Superman season 2, Mr. Future.
Great.